privilege and a pleasure to invite the students from our 10th grade confirmation class to share their wisdom with us. Tonight it's especially a pleasure to invite my son to share his wisdom with us.
The great Jewish sage Maimonides taught that Teshuvah is really demonstrated when one has the opportunity to sin again in the same way and doesn't. This Torah portion is an example of Teshuvah. It takes place after Joseph became Pharaoh's second in command. There was a massive famine throughout the land, and Jacob sent Joseph's brothers to beg the Egyptians to sell them food. Although they do not recognize him, Joseph sees that these are his brothers who once sold him to slavery. Joseph tests them by insisting that they bring back their youngest brother, Benjamin, who was Jacob's favorite son. When they come back, Joseph plants a goblet in Benjamin's bag and pretends that Benjamin stole it. He then threatens to imprison Benjamin. Then Judah, knowing how upset his father was at the loss of Joseph, begged this powerful foreign man to take him instead. Joseph saw that his brothers had changed, and he revealed his true identity. Not only did the brothers decline the opportunity to sin again by sacrificing one of their siblings, but they offered their own lives to prevent it. Tragedy is something that every single person in this room has had to deal with at one time or another. It could have been anything from witnessing your beloved local football team losing on a last-second missed extra point. It could have been receiving a grade that you think is unfair. Some of us have even experienced more serious and long-lasting tragedies, such as losing a loved one. Some tragedies happen to us, and others we bring on ourselves. But after the tragedy happens, what matters is how we react and what we learn. Although the brothers were the ones to sell Joseph, they experienced the tragedy of nearly destroying their father's life, and they knew that they would have to carry that guilt with them for the rest of their lives. We don't hear much about them after they break the news of Joseph's supposed death to their father, but when we meet them again during the famine, they are in the same situation that caused the tragedy in the first place. They could either sacrifice their brothers to save their lives, or they could demonstrate Teshuvah and make the selfless decision. The tragedy of their father's despair could have caused them to tumble into a loop of cruel decisions. It could have caused their hearts to harden, or even they could have repeated the same decision. But instead, they used the pain as a catalyst for change. Because of Sunday school, I learned all the Torah stories at a pretty young age. At first, I just accepted them as facts because adults were telling me them. But as kids get older, we begin to question everything we are taught when we were younger. I struggled a lot with being able to believe that God magically created the world in 7 days, or that he suddenly flooded the earth, ridding it of evil. What I love about the story of Joseph and his brothers is that God didn't make the brothers change their ways with a snap of his fingers. Instead, we know that it was a gradual process that took years to end up working. This, to me, made the story so much more powerful because the process the brothers went through seemed realistic. No two people in this room have the exact same belief about what God is or what God does. That's why the story of Joseph is so special. Because you don't have to believe that God controls our lives to learn that your reaction to tragedy is what's most important. This is crucial for us to learn from because tragedy is such a common occurrence in our lives. We need to use the mistakes we make and the tragedies we go through as a learning experience to help ourselves become the best humans we can be. And to do this, we can look at the stories in the Torah, whether you believe they happened or not. Joseph said to his brothers, "Now, do not be distressed or reproach yourselves because you sold me hither. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you." See, Joseph sees his brothers' changes as orchestrated by God. You can see it that way, or you could see God as the inspiration for change. You don't even have to believe that God was involved at all. Regardless, the brothers demonstrating Teshuvah is the important part of the story. I know that this story will influence my decisions in the future, even if it's not an option to sell my sister into Egyptian slavery. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
you got a